Good morning, bonjour. Je suis ici pour une réponse à l'annonce de ce matin de M. Prentice, ministre de l'Environnement. I'd like to make a quick response to the announcements of earlier today from Environment Minister Jim Prentice. Clearly, the Harper government had done everything possible to keep climate change off the G8, G20 agenda. The fact that this year, for the first time in several decades, a G8 summit was convened without an advance meeting in which our Environment Minister Jim Prentice would welcome to Canada his colleagues, environment ministers from all the other nations, to put together a serious approach to climate change for impressive new commitments in a communique was a real tragedy. This morning we see Mr. Harper and Mr. Prentice attempting to play catch-up, recognizing that when the world comes to Canada, the world will discuss climate change, whether the Harper government likes it or not. These announcements are less than meet the eye. Let's just have a look. If you look at the commitment to phasing out coal-fired power plants, what we find is that this does not touch existing plants. So the 13% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions that come from coal-fired power plants in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, one in Manitoba, Ontario, Nova Scotia, these will continue to be releasing greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. One must pause and commend the McGuinty government for the commitment to phase out coal in Ontario. This is a very significant commitment. We would like to see Premier Stelmach make the same commitment and phase out the existing plants as soon as possible. We will have to wait to see the regulations that Mr. Prentice has promised. We'll have to wait some 6 months. They're promised for early 2011. We will then have to wait 5 years for the regulations to take effect. And those regulations, when and if they take effect, only deal with new performance standards for new coal-fired power plants. This country should not build a single new coal-fired power plant. It's absolutely unacceptable to imagine that we would continue to build infrastructure that burns coal, regardless of its performance standard. So setting that aside, what would we do if we were serious and the federal government were serious about phasing out coal? One need only look back to the programs that Mr. Harper canceled when he became Prime Minister early in 2006. In the spring of 2005, the minority Liberal government brought forward a plan that included large amounts of funding to provinces to deliver on greenhouse gas reductions. At the time, there was discussion in Ontario of how much they wanted to work with the federal government to improve the grid connection between Manitoba and Ontario, between Quebec and Ontario, so that Ontario electricity consumers would be able to more easily purchase and rely upon the existing hydro in Manitoba and Quebec. So without any new hydro plants being built, the large infrastructure investment that's needed to help Ontario get off coal is to build the transmission corridors to bring on board Manitoba hydropower, Quebec hydropower into Ontario. In Alberta, they could close down every coal-fired power plant and substitute with natural gas. If they stopped putting all their eggs in one basket, the federal government has put billions into carbon capture and storage in what's more of a public relations effort to defend the tar sands. If some of that money was allocated to the transition of coal-fired power plants to natural gas high efficiency, you could shut down coal-fired power plants in Alberta while helping a sector that right now is in the doldrums, and that's the natural gas sector in Alberta. The second piece of the announcement is doing what Mr. Prentice calls our fair share for international development assistance. This needs to be examined very closely, and from the existing information, we can't know what pocket the federal government is taking their $400 million to assist with developing countries' needs relating to climate crisis. If it is, as I suspect from the CETA budget, this is a budget that has just been frozen, where we also have existing commitments to continue to assist in Afghanistan, to rebuild Haiti, and the budget is frozen. So it really does raise the question, where will this money come from? What other programs will be lost? This is a minimum amount. This is not enough, nor does it take into account that the Copenhagen Accord not just committing what the press release from Mr. Prentice's office identifies, $30 billion between 2010 and 2012. By the year 2020, the global figure is supposed to be $100 billion a year. So it would be worth asking the Harper government, what do we do next year? And what do we do the year after that? And are we really committed to assisting developing countries get away from dependence on fossil fuels, move towards development that is carbon neutral? At the same time, it would be worth asking, why did we continue to pressure the government of South Africa to build a coal-fired electricity generating plant? Why was it that Peter Van Loan went to South Africa to pressure them to build a coal-fired electrical generating station? So again, as we've gotten used to with the Harper government, this is too little too late. These are our small commitments, as welcome as they are to even hear the words responding to the climate crisis coming from this government. The reality of these commitments is that it does very little domestically to achieve greenhouse gas reductions. It does not change the fact that our target is weaker than the target adopted by the Obama government, despite their use of smoke and mirrors and numbers and changing years. We have the weakest commitment of any of the countries in the G8. We are the only country anywhere in the world that violated our Kyoto commitments. Aussi, aujourd'hui, on peut dire un peu en français, c'est nécessaire à dire que c'est les bonnes nouvelles d'avoir le gouvernement de M. Harper dit quelque chose de tout au sujet de la crise climatique. C'est évident que le gouvernement de M. Harper a essayé d'avertir en discussion dans le G20 au sujet du changement climatique. Elle a fait l'effort pour annuler sur l'horaire la question de changement climatique, en préférence pour seulement concentrer sur les questions économiques. Mais les questions sont les mêmes. Le développement économique et le développement écologique sont les mêmes questions et tous les autres pays du monde comprennent ça. Monsieur Ban Ki-moon, secrétaire général des Nations Unies, comprend ça. C'est la question d'une révolution économique verte. Alors, l'annonce aujourd'hui, M. Prentice a dit que dans 5 années prochaines sur 2015, nous avons dans 5 années les règlements pour réduire l'émission de nouvelles usines qui utilisent le charbon pour l'électricité. Alors, c'est incroyable de penser à les nouvelles usines charbon électrifiées. C'est une question affreuse de penser que le Canada va construire les nouvelles usines de charbon. C'est nécessaire d'avoir les investissements pour l'énergie renouvelable, pour toutes les autres façons pour mettre sur pied un système renouvelable. Et aussi, aujourd'hui, il y a une annonce pour les nouveaux fonds pour les pays en développement pour combattre le changement climatique. C'est pour 400 millions de dollars. C'est une bonne annonce. C'est important pour le Canada de faire notre part pour aider les pays en train de développement, mais ce n'est pas suffisant. C'est très petit et en même temps, le gouvernement de M. Harper a fait l'effort pour la pression pour, par exemple, le pays de Sud-Afrique, Afrique du Sud, pour la croissance de l'utilisation de charbon pour l'électricité. Aujourd'hui, je pense que le gouvernement de M. Harper a découvert que les autres pays de G20 sont vraiment engagés sur les questions de changement climatique. Et après les efforts de M. Harper d'éviter une discussion et les négociations pour le climat dans les prochaines réunions à Toronto, il a découvert que ce n'est pas possible d'éviter cette discussion. Les gouvernements du monde, au Canada, ici, comme notre nos invités, exigeaient de parler un sujet fondamental pour l'avenir du monde. Et le changement climatique, c'est la question primordiale du monde.